So this is about, this is for the riparian pot, Satus Creek Riparian. And this is a little bit, intense because it's got two separate sites within this project that are separated by about 10 miles. So I'm gonna be discussing them separately. They're part of the same request, just because they're on the same creek that has similar issues up and down it.
Oops, sorry.
That's okay. I think they got the picture right. I'll just say this is a view looking up over the upper site, up towards Satus Pass. And you can see that there's a paucity of riparian vegetation in this area. This is a new drone, which we're using a lot of, so it's kind of a typical view. There's Highway 97 on the right. So that's what it is. This slide. Okay, it actually really is cut off, but I'll just keep going until it's fixed. But this is a slide, I think Tom Ring first kind of put this together. It's something like what you used to have. And it's for anyone that works for the Yakama Nation, it's really important for us to keep saying it, you know, that we're working with partners, not only in the reservation, but throughout the 10 million acre ceded territories and usually customed areas to secure treaty rights. That's an ongoing fight. And this presentation is actually part of that. And so reserved in the ceded territories and on the reservation are, you know, of course, rights to harvest traditionally and especially to fish. Also rights to water. And this project helps on that front directly.
Here's the mouse back.
Sorry. Need one of the top thing off, so I was trying to.
Give it one click.
Okay.
You should have control after this. Yeah.
So here's the species we're dealing with, Middle Columbia summer steelhead. There's a map of the Washington areas that are listed where the Middle Columbia steelhead is listed as ESA threatened. An arrow pointing to the Satus Creek Basin. And on the upper left, you see a graph of the estimated adult escapement for Satus Creek by the Yakama Nation's VSP project, up to 21. And you can see it at, you know, like almost all Middle Columbia steelhead. If you look at a graph of the run at Bonneville, it looks like this. You look at a graph of the run at Prosser, it looks like this. Nobody's doing really well. Their Middle Columbia steelhead population, Satus Creek especially, had a big boom in the early 2010s and then has declined more or less steadily since then. So it's not a happy story here on Satus Creek, despite the fact that there's been a fair amount of restoration done. I do want to say we've been finding more reds this year. We have excellent red data for Satus Creek. It's the lowest trib to the Yakama River. It's hot and dry. The water comes up quickly, leading to good conditions for counting reds. And so the reds are a little better this year than they were last year. So we'll see what it looks like. As I said, it's a hot, dry basin. On the left is a precipitation map done by the GS of the Yakama Basin. And much of Satus Creek is in the 6 to 10 inch zone. It is a sagebrush desert. And the average precipitation is only about 17 inches a year throughout the whole 400 square mile basin. So it's a dry, arid place. The snow melts quickly, comes off fast in the spring. Its base flow is about 20 cubic feet per second in August. The largest flood record is about 30,000 CFS for scale. That is a huge flood on a small creek, and that plays a role in this story too. That was in 1974. And you know, that's a big number. I don't have any reason to doubt it. It's in a publication by the GS, so it's there. It's about a 10,000 year flood when you look at the flood record. So it was a big one. The two sites I talked about, here's just a plain old map. In the upper middle center, there's Toppenish for orientation. You can see the Thule Road is the lower property, just to have a name to hang on it. It's a big floodplain. And then the upper alluvial reach, kind of a generic name, but that's what it is. And they're located at stream miles 12 and 28 on alluvial zones. The relevant fish species, the Columbia steelhead, all life stages, spawns here, adults go here, it rears here. And I know that, I'm not sure if the surfboard actually officially looks at lamprey, but it's an extremely important species for stream ecology and for the Yakama Nation that we're working hard to restore. Pacific lamprey also spawns, rears as adults in Satus Creek. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I will say that this project is a riparian project and as such does address some of the limiting factors and ecological concerns that are both listed in the recovery plan and the updated recovery plan that we, Yakama Nation and the recovery board are working on, and is a draft version is out. And on sort of known concerns. The upstream site here is definitely part of the focus area, where it seems to be on the shoulder. I think I gave you the wrong river mile for that. When I looked at it, I was like, oh, did I go that high? But, it's intended to be in this focus area where right now, the stream temperature is tolerable for most life stages. 30 years from now, that might not be the case, so we think riparian shade would be a good thing in that reach. The lower reach, that is not the case. And then it does a bunch of good things for basically increasing habitat complexity through large wood in the stream, and through pools. I can read through this if you want, but I think I won't, unless someone has questions about it later. Basically, the wood addresses a lot of habitat complexity, ecological concerns, as well as a sort of almost anecdotal, but I haven't had time to look at it quantitatively. We have noticed, as I said, we have about 20 years of really good spawning counts, red counts. We have GPS locations for those reds every year. And they seem to prefer to spawn on the main stem here, where there's riparian cover. Tim Rezeki, our fish scientist, thinks it's because there's increased bank roughness and gravel sorting creates good spawning beds. Could be. So that's another sort of thing to think about with riparian. Of course, beyond the direct fish connection, riparian forest in an arid land, performs, it's critical to every aquatic and floodplain function that there is. Food web, water quality, geomorphic processes, habitat formation. I think, what I remember is, about 75% of species in arid zones need the riparian zone, terrestrial and aquatic. They need it. And so it's a super important thing, even beyond the fish. This action aligns pretty well with the steelhead recovery plan. The update lists specifically riparian reforestation to protect stream temperature. It basically is covered by basin-wide action 12 mostly. And then we get to the purpose and goals. The overarching goal here, this is where the treaty rights come into it right now, because the Yakama Nation honors the Endangered Species Act. And this species was listed in closed reservation waters to steelhead and trout fishing for everybody, including tribal members. So we have a situation where on the reservation that was set aside by the federal government for tribal members, they can't go fish for trout. They can't fish for trout. And that is really a bad deal, especially for you. I heard Councilman Heensaw say, he would like to do more than drive by a spot and tell his grandkids that's where he used to fish. So the whole point of the program that I'm leading now and that Shannon there used to lead is to recover the species so that for us, tribal members can fish on the reservation, in this case for steelhead and trout. This is when you think about it, it's a very deeply messed up thing that we're looking at there. So this project points directly at that treaty right. And of course, then the more technical ones, supporting restoration and continued existence of steelhead, forest cover for its own sake because of the ecological functions I mentioned, and restoring riparian dependent ecosystem functions. So one thing that's driving this particular project is a older assessment, but it still holds. It was done by a person that worked with Yakama Nation while she was getting her thesis at Central Washington, Katie Gellenbeck. And what she found was basically there was a real shift in riparian composition between 1949 and I think it's 1996. She has 95, but I think she was looking at the 96 aerials. And there are two things, major things seem to be happening, maybe three. One is on the table on the left, you can see wet herbaceous vegetation declined a lot between 49 and 96. And there's a reason for that, and that is water diversions on Satus Creek during the middle part of the 20th century. There were a lot of little diversions up and down it. Tom Ring probably knows the exact number. I don't. They were bought up in the mid 90s by the Yakama Nation, so they don't exist anymore, but they probably had a really dire effect while they were in effect. And then the other thing that happened was a slight decline in overall cottonwood cover, still looking at the table on the left. Alder cover exploded in the same interim. And then on the right is just looking at age classes of different trees. And you can see cottonwood, if you go to young, not much in either. And that is still the case today. There's not very much young cottonwood on this floodplain. Mature cottonwood declined dramatically and decadent cottonwood increased a lot. So the picture is of aging cottonwoods aging out. Whoa, I'm way behind. I'm going to speed up here. Thank you, Shane.
Yeah.
And I'll just say real quick, white alder is a great tree. It has many cultural uses. It doesn't do the same things that cottonwood does for a stream system in terms of shade and structure. it's a smaller, shorter lived tree. And so I think it's better to have more cottonwood there, and losing a bunch of cottonwood is not a good thing for the system. Just a reminder, I'm gonna go real quick here, the Tooley Road site. This is a satellite picture showing a 2016 range fire. One of the things about alders is when they burn, they don't resprout, so you end up with, that picture's in 2018, a weedy mess with a bunch of dead trunks. No resprouting, you lost your riparian forest when alders burn. And that's one of the reasons why we're working at this lower site. There's a image of the ACE, the cultural ape. So in this area between 2011 and 21, I did the mapping just on GIS. We had about 100 acres of loss. That's about 50%. And so you can see through the yellow hatch, this is the 2011 photo, infrared. And if I go there, that's what it looks like today, more or less. So the planting sites cover areas where there are no more trees. And most of that, about 80% of that are alders that burned and did not resprout. There's more, just, you go out there, it's dead trunks on the ground, and bare dirt. So that's what we're trying to address. This is the lower site, and this is really a site where to me, it's much more about ecosystem function. It's much more about eventual wood in the stream, terrestrial habitat as well as aquatic habitat. It's, it's one of these things where I think for riparian forest, we can definitely draw a long-term fish connection. The function of the stream relies on the riparian forest. We can't so much as say, it's not like a log structure where you build it, there's instant habitat, right? It's not that kind of thing at all. It's something we need to tend and steward for the long term. And that's what's going on here.
Sorry, Tom, when was the fire?
2016.
Thank
you. There was another one in 2018 further downstream. It's a place that burns both from anthropogenic starts and from natural fire. So the plan here, there's a side channel, there's LiDAR. This is the planting plan. This project is expensive, and I'm not gonna apologize for that because we're working in a desert. And we're gonna use large wood structures, a couple of large wood structures, and then a lot of hand-built wood structures to boost the water level to help our plants through the summer. So you can see these side channels are ideal, where I have the side channels labeled. Backing water into those is very important to get the water table up across the floodplain and planting areas. This orange areas are planting zones, little white bars are low-tech wood structure. Is it trying to cut me off or?
You won the lottery.
Oh, already, this is all it took. The stars are just a few engineered log structures that, handle structures won't hang in the main stem of Satus Creek. Large wood structures will, and so it's to back them up, and then once you're in the side channels, to back it up further with low-tech structures. We may need to end up irrigating supplementally as well. It's just very dry here. And the goal for us is live plants at the end of 5 years, right? The upper alluvial reach, color infrared, which I love, a picture of the site there. You can see the dark in the yellow box, you see scattered red, some shrubs, and you see the dark, which there's water. This is a site I chose because it doesn't have veg now, but it does have water almost every year. As opposed to some sites on this part of Satus just go dry every year. I don't think that's a good place to plant. So this place does have water, but it doesn't have veg. We could get into the geomorphology of this alluvial floodplain and alluvial fans coming down from the sides and talk a long time, but I'll just leave it at that for now. It's super interesting. And then here's a close-up. Again, that's the ape, the preliminary ape, and it's the same kind of concept. Planting zones in orange. Stars are large engineered structures, and the white bars are hand-built structures, especially in that left-hand side channel. On the right-hand channel, it's a main channel, so one structure and just a couple of smaller structures upstream of it in the backwater where it's a little more gentle. Same concept. Tree and shrub species, sticking a lot with willows and cottonwoods, Salicaceae, no alders. And one of the things about willows and cottonwoods and aspen, they all resprout like crazy when they burn. Very important here, as we've seen. Pine is important, I think, for another climate change adaptation. Pine is very drought hardy. Pine will grow in this floodplain. It probably won't reproduce because it's too dry, but Joel Freudenthal actually has showed that you can get it to grow fine on these lower floodplains once you get it started. So I think planning ahead for climate change is really important, and pine is one of the species that will hang where some of these others might not. And then there's wetter and drier areas, and there's some culturally important plants in there. The timeline is, assuming we're successful, get the award in 24. It takes us a while to process the grant. We really start work in January of 25 and end up planting in the fall and summer of 26. And part of that is because we need some design for the wood structures, can't just throw them in. Cost estimate. So I will get into the derivation on the next slide. It's pretty hefty. It's for 15 acres of planting. I made a mistake on that slide because I just copied it to my next presentation. It's actually 15. Bottom line total is around 730,000. And this is why. So I do want to spend a tiny bit of time, even though I'm running out here. So it's very hard to come by good cost estimates for riparian planting. It's especially hard to come by good cost estimates for planting that has good monitoring that you can rely on, that's reported in a clear way. So fortunately in this basin, we have two of those things in one, which is Mid-Columbia. They did a ringer loop project in 2019. Again, the goal is survival at the end of 5 years. It's not cost per plant the first year, it's cost per plant year 5 and out. So you put a lot of effort up front to get them to survive. And you can see that survival on the lower left there. The red is 2022, the green is 21. They planted in 2020. They had extremely high survival. This attracted me to this style of planting, deep planting using heavy machinery, especially where the water table is low. We're going to put in piezometers the first year to figure out exactly where the water table is. That's ultra important. So you plant the right elevations. Then we all know that something happened between 2019 and now that really ramped up inflation, COVID. There's a great report by an industry consulting firm called CBRE that I've relied on a lot, and they produce an inflation index specifically for the construction industry. That's on the lower right. That green line is their index. That index went up about 30% between 2019 and 2025 there when we were going to start to plant. We're basically going to put out bids. So that I took the per acre cost, 23,700. I boosted the maintenance to 5 years. So we end up with a starting cost of 2,700 per acre plus 4,500 for maintenance, not per acre, just flat fee. Then the inflation index is about 30. Added them up and multiplied by 1.28, and you get about 32,640 per acre. That's where my cost comes from. So just want to be clear about it. In case you had questions, I'm happy to talk about that. And then on top of that, we have a little bit of engineering for the log structures. So it's more than just a straight up planting project. It is engineering and installation of large wood. Constraints, I've talked about the water. There's herbivory, we'll have to put protection up for that. Fire is a challenge, and I think that we can do several things there. Plant resprouting species, pine once it gets big, resist fire. And also I think we can work with our fuels program and mow fire lines around that are already out there a lot, especially in the early years, so the planting itself doesn't get destroyed. It's probably not a permanent thing, but I believe we can do that with our fellow programs on the Yakama Nation. And I'll leave it at that.
I got 2 questions. The first had to do with your timeline there. I really appreciate your thinking about maintenance and thinking about it's year 5 plants that matter, not year 1 that matters. My question though is about the surfboard grant. I thought it's a 3-year funding window. Will that,
5 years for riparian.
is it? Okay,
think
that's
so.
what I was wondering, is if this fits into the,
If I remember correctly, that's what it is for the riparian. We can check that.
okay.
I
And
think
then,
that was one of the unusual features of the riparian fund.
Well, the riparian should be the same as regular surfboard, which is recommended 3 years, but feasible up through 5 to extend.
Okay,
okay,
You want the bulk of the costs up front, but it can be extended.
okay, so you can set it up this way.
Yep.
Okay, great. The other question is about grazing and protection, and I don't know exactly, I don't know the landscape that well, but I know there's horses and cattle in different spots, so what's the plan to protect these?
well, it's interesting. There is grazing out there, but very little by cattle right now on that floodplain. Like, for example, the site we went to 2 years ago, I think. It shows it's a grazing allotment, but when you walk out there, I realize I'm not seeing signs of grazing in a lot of these places. Like, if you get up, and on the lower site, there is no grazing. There is no wild horses. So there's browsing by wild horses, which is a different beast entirely. That could be a problem on the upper site. I don't see a lot of, I'm very familiar with these sites. I was out on both of them last week. Did not see a lot of sign of horses. There were a few stud piles in the upper site. Wasn't like there's some areas where you can tell they concentrate and there's bare dirt. It's not like that. So there is a grazing. I think we'll have to wait and see how big an issue it is and react. We're gonna put tree tubes on initially, to protect. There's also beavers, of course.
Sure.
That's just a fact of life, right? So,
Yeah.
so the planting density is pretty high, in part to account for that. We would probably come back and ask for money here, or try to do with our BPA crew, put up some protective fencing if browsing by stock got to be an issue.
Okay, but when you're walking around out there at these two sites at least, and you're looking at the veg that is there, you're not seeing
They do
indications
not
of heavy
scream-
browse.
They do not scream overgrazing to me, and some sites do, but not.
Okay, thanks.
And I've just, yeah, it could change in 3 years, but that's what it was last week.
I was walking the stream actually this week and I didn't see much sign of grading either.
Yeah. Yep, there you go. There,
Have you,
Xavier's already very familiar with.
Yeah.
have you considered using the Oregon white oak?
We have, yeah, we could use it, I think that it's a great tree, obviously really drought resistant, grows naturally out there. It's usually set back a little bit on terraces, so in terms of planting near the channels, I don't think about it right away, but it would be interesting to throw some in and see how they do.
Do you have any indication of the depth of soil moisture, or is that softeners are gonna inform?
I think it is about at creek level, which is, gonna be 1 to 5, 6 feet down. And I wanna know exactly where this is, which is what the barometer is going for. And we'll get help from our hydrogeologist.
The total acreage planted was
15, 10 on the lower side, 5 on the upper side.
Anybody else?
This will be interesting.
Thanks for your time, guys.
This is for the riparian pond, which gives a lot more leeway for sites that are mainly focused on healthy riparian, even if they don't score as high for fish. Our ranking, because we decided to use the same ranking, will likely put them in an order to fish, but it doesn't knock things out eligibility wise, and this is something where we'll be probably having some discussion, given the riparian criteria. Do we move things about? How do they fall? So we'll just have to see when we get there, because this is a new experience.
Is there a relation? I mean, there is, I think I say listed fish involved here.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
no, and you'll be ranked according to that.
Okay,
I'm just saying it's not as much of a sole driver, and we'll have to have that discussion when we're ranking riparian projects.
And Elizabeth brought up that these riparian funds are carbon funds, so they're the ones that we won't know whether we have them until after November.
it's still just paper money,
Oh,
right?
okay,
Just theoretical money, so.
theoretically, yeah.
Paper water, paper money.